Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. This morning we're continuing our series, Blessed, where we have been working our way through what is most commonly known as the Beatitudes, or the blessed statements of Jesus found in Matthew 5. And this morning we are talking all about mercy. Back in 2018, Botham Jean was, or more commonly known as Bo by his friends. He was a member of West Dallas Church of Christ and a Harding University alumnus. And he was sitting in his apartment on his couch eating a bowl of ice cream when Amber Geiger, a off-duty cop, entered his apartment, mistaking it for her own, and shot him twice through the chest, killing him. And in her trial, where she was convicted for murder, Bo's younger brother, Brant, did the unthinkable. After he gave his statement, where he could have spewed hatred and demanded justice, after he gave his statement, he asked the judge if he could go and give Amber, his brother's murderer, a hug. And he does. And he says that God called him to forgive her. He does something radical and he forgives his brother's murderer. Has God ever called you to do something radical? As I've gotten to know more and more of you, I know that this is true. For some of you, God has called you to go and leave the comforts of this country and live in a country that speaks a different language, has different customs, as Mitchell said, may not have air conditioning, and go and live there for a time. For some of you, He has called you to radical generosity, where instead of buying a boat or a vacation house, you have instead given your money to support water wells and schools and hospitals and places that desperately need those things. And for some of you, He has called you to radical forgiveness. And forgive someone that, just like Brant, Bo's younger brother, forgive someone that the world wouldn't judge you if you held a grudge and never forgave them. And the story we're looking at this morning, God calls Hosea to something radical as well. If you have your Bibles, open up to Hosea, or your phones. I guess phones is more realistic. If you have your phones, open up to Hosea chapter 1, starting in verse 2. It says, when the Lord first spoke through Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, go take to yourself a wife of whoredom and have children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom by forsaking the Lord. So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of I should look that up. Diblium, I guess. And she conceived and bore him a son. Now, who had the preacher saying whoredom 3 times on their bingo card this morning? But God calls Hosea to do something radical. And take this promiscuous woman, Gomer, as a wife and have children with her. And you know, if this was today and I was counseling you and you said, well, I feel like God is calling me to do this, I'd be like, are you sure that that's really from God? And so why does God call Hosea to do this? Why does God call Hosea to do this radical thing and taking this promiscuous woman as a wife and start a family with her? Well, it's because God is using this as a real-life metaphor for what the Israelites, their spiritual adultery to him is like. And more importantly, he's using it as a real-life metaphor to demonstrate how he is going to redeem them in this process. And a common misconception when we read this story, and a common mistake that we do, is we like to put ourselves in the shoes of Hosea. But we aren't Hosea in this story. We are actually Gomer, the promiscuous woman, the wife of whoredom. Verse 4. And the Lord said to him, "Call his name Jezreel, for in just a little while I will punish the house of Jehu for the blood of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. And on that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. She conceived again and bore a daughter, and the Lord said to him, call her name No Mercy, for I will no more have mercy on the house of Israel to forgive them at all. But I will have mercy on the house of Judah, and I will save them by the Lord their God. I will not save them by the bow or by the sword or by war or by horses or by horsemen. When she had weaned no mercy, she conceived and bore a son. And the Lord said, call his name Not My People, for you are not my people, and I am not your God. And the names here are important. The Jezreel is to be the coming judgment of God. And then No Mercy is to show that God, because of Israel's sin, is not going to show them mercy. And Not My People is to say that it's kind of reversing the covenant that you will be my people, or I will be your God and you will be my people. It's reversing that covenant. And so the names are important. And when we read on in chapter 2, we discover that Gomer, she decides to leave Hosea and go live in her sinful ways. To put this in kind of a modern context, I want you to, we are Gomer in this story, but I want you to, for a minute, imagine that you are Hosea. And you are married and you have this beautiful family and you're trying to raise this family. And anyone who has a family knows that that's hard enough on its own. But then your spouse goes ahead and leaves and decides that they don't want anything to do with you or the family anymore, and they are going to leave and abandon you with you and your kids. And so now you're all alone and you have to raise this family on your own. And this is where Hosea finds himself. And not only that, the wife goes or the spouse goes and does whatever they want, sleeps with whomever they want, racks up this massive amount of debt. And Hosea, yes, finds himself in a difficult position. But it isn't so much the position, it's the devastation that he feels from the betrayal and the leaving of Gomer. It's Gomer breaks his heart in the process. And if anyone has gone through something similar, you know this to be true. Hosea's heart is broken through this process. And oftentimes we think of kind of sin as this, as a list of like rules that you can and can't do. And because of we think of sin that way, we think that the Bible is kind of just this rule book of things that you should and shouldn't do. And we view the Bible as a rule book, but that is not what the Bible is. The Bible is a guide to a flourishing relationship with God. And it's because of that relationship aspect, which is why sin is so tragic. Because, you see, sin is not just breaking a rule. It is breaking a rule, but it's not just that. Sin isn't just breaking a rule, it is breaking God's heart. Sin breaks God's heart, and it breaks that relationship. It's kind of like when you discover that someone lies to you. The first time you discover that someone lies to you, it's not so much the lie that hurts so much, but it's the broken relationship that hurts. It's in the back of your mind, every time they tell you something now, you wonder if what they are telling you is true. The lie doesn't hurt as much as that broken relationship and that broken trust. And that broken just relationship that you now have with that person. Your relationship is never the same after that. Sin isn't just breaking a rule. It breaks God's heart. And I think... Do I have my slides mixed up? No, I don't. And if we go back to Hosea, the story of Hosea, Hosea had every right to divorce Gomer. Culturally, that would have been expected of the time. Hosea could have and should have divorced Gomer as a result of what she had done to him. And even if God had called Hosea to forgive her, he could have forgiven her and pardoned her and still divorced her and had nothing to do with her, and no one would have blamed him. Because that would have been, remember, Gomer broke Hosea's heart. And that would have been expected. But you see, mercy or forgiveness isn't just a pardon. It is an active purchase. Mercy isn't just a forgiveness or a pardon. It is an active purchase. And we see this in chapter 3 of Hosea. Verse 1, it says, "And the Lord said to me, go again, love a woman who is loved by another man and is an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the children of Israel. Though they turn to other gods and love cakes of raisin, so I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and a homer and a lechek of barley." And so Hosea, think of Hosea and the humiliation he must feel going to the slave market to buy back his wife. The wife lives this, Gomer lives this life of sin and is promiscuous and racks up all this debt to the point where she is on sale at the slavery market, and God calls Homer to go to the slavery market in front of everyone who knows that she is his wife and actively purchase her back. You see, while we often view mercy as kind of just this passive pardon, God views mercy as an active purchase. It is an active purchase. Hosea, who is full of mercy, goes to the market and purchases his wife back. despite the cost, despite the humiliation, despite the shame, he goes and purchases his wife back. In verse 3 of chapter 3, it says, "And I said to her, you must dwell as mine for many days. You shall not play the whore or belong to another man, so will I also be to you. For the children of Israel shall dwell many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or pillar, without ephod or household gods. Afterward, the children of Israel shall return and seek the Lord their God and David their king, and they shall come in fear to the Lord and to his goodness in the latter days." I think it's important for me to kind of talk about abuse a little bit. Unfortunately, we live in a society where abuse is more common than it should be. And maybe you are in an abusive relationship. And here's what I don't want this text to do. I don't want this text or for you to think that I am calling you to stay in an abusive relationship. That's not what I'm doing at all. And that's not what this text is doing either. If you look at verse 3, it says when Hosea brought Gomer home, it says that she even had to live a time to demonstrate that she had changed and wasn't abusive anymore. And so maybe you are in an abusive relationship. That could be verbal, mental, physical, even sexual abuse. And if that is you, oftentimes you'll see this in churches a lot, in the news. Oftentimes, churches sympathize with the abuser and not the abused. And that is not what we're trying to say here. And that it will not happen here. And so if you are in an abusive relationship, let us help you get out of that relationship. Let us help you. And I pray that you have the courage to let us help you so that you can get out of that relationship. And hundreds of years later, when Jesus is preaching on a hillside in the Sermon on the Mount, his listeners would have known and understood this story about Hosea and his wife Gomer. And this is when he says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy." You see, Jesus isn't just calling people to forgive these minor offenses. He is calling people to radical mercy. He's calling people to do the unthinkable and forgive, just like he called Brant to do to his brother's murderer. He is calling his listeners and his disciples, he is calling us to radical mercy. And Jesus, he understands this and he lives this out. You see, a few years after he says this, he actually goes to the slave market of sin where we are all for sale because of our sins, and he is stripped naked and beaten and tortured, and he purchases us back with his death on the cross. His blood purchases us back. Because mercy isn't just a pardon. It's an active purchase. And Jesus lives this out when he decides to go to the cross and purchase us back with his blood. And so imagine for a moment imagine what would happen if we fully embraced and understood and were so overwhelmed by the mercy that God demonstrates to us and that Christ demonstrates to us on the cross. Imagine how that would change your interactions in your family and at your workplace. Imagine how that would change this church in the way that we interact with others. We would become the most patient and kind and unoffendable church in all of Knoxville, because we understand the mercy that Jesus gives us, and we want to pay that forward to others. And so as I've been preaching, you've probably been thinking about a name or a face of someone that has wronged you that you need to demonstrate mercy to. And so here's what I want us to do. I have kind of a activity for you to do this week. One day during your quiet time, think of that person and write their name down on a sheet. And pray for them and hand it over to God. And then in big, bold letters, write, paid in full by Christ over it. And then crumple it up and throw it away. And don't just do this in your mind, actually do this. And that crumpling up of their name and throwing it away and handing it over to God will be a big step in you being able to demonstrate mercy to them. But mercy actually costs us something, doesn't it? It cost Hosea his pride, and it cost Jesus his life. And so here's what I want us to do. Do something that costs you this week towards that person. It could be a physical cost. It could be taking them out for lunch or coffee. It could be. It could cost you your pride by being the first one to break that barrier and approach them and talk about it. To be the one that lowers your pride and goes and works to restore that relationship. Whatever it costs you, do something that costs you this week towards that person. And if this week you are inundated with a bunch of coffee requests and prayers saying, hey, I'm praying for you and so forth, then maybe that is God's way of telling you that you need to work on your interaction with others. But do something that costs you this week towards that person. With a caveat there. If that person is an abuser to you, don't reach out to them. Just pray for them. Don't put yourself back in a bad situation. And so let's be so overwhelmed by the mercy of Christ that it leads us to be merciful to others. Even if it's unfathomable, even if it's radical, even if it costs us dearly. So go and do something that costs you this week towards those that have offended you because of what Jesus has done for us. If you're here this morning and you want the mercy that Christ offers, there's going to be our shepherds in the back in room 113 they would love to talk to you about that. And they would love to walk you through how to put Christ on in baptism so that you can receive that mercy.
Church, will you stand?